Tom Campbell here. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you and enjoy the video.
All right, Tom, we have a question from Anonymous about work in NPMR. That's non-physical matter reality. The question is, you've talked a lot about jobs there, but are there other options besides reincarnation?
Well, mostly the getting put to work is not in place of another experience packet, but rather to make the experience package you're in much richer and have a lot varied experience. So yes, if you, let's say you are a seeker and you meditate regularly and maybe you go out of body regularly, so you go exploring, but the exploring just eventually becomes kind of boring because you've been in there and done a lot of that and you're wondering what to do next. That's the standing around in the non-physical, wondering what to do next. And typically when you get to that point, the system will come up with something that is going to teach you, something that will help you learn. It may just send you to a particular place, like an out of body, maybe a particular kind of out of body that opens questions and answers and all sorts of things, not questions and answers as far as talking like we're doing here, but you just run into things that you have to deal with that helps you grow up. Or like for me, I got sent to work at Transition Central there for a while where people who were dying were coming through, and I was part of the process of greeting and dealing with that string. And I did that for months. It was a fairly long time. Every time I'd shut my eyes, there I was. It's like I couldn't get away from it. It was there because I needed that experience to understand death. It was this experience I had. So it just was given to me. And, it's like I have these ideas that sometimes I'm just on my own, a student roaming through the halls, kind of seeing what I can get into and what I might find out. And other times I feel like somebody has put me in a classroom and is definitely, I'm in school. And those times that I feel like I'm in school is like when I was sent to, Transition Central. All right, I'm here to learn something. Some of the times my out of bodies have been that way. I get sent someplace and I say, well, what's this all about? And it takes me a while and I don't get it. So I end up going there again. And every time I relax and let my mind go, there I am again. It's like a dream that you can't stop dreaming. Every time you close your eyes, there's that dream again. It's that sort of thing. And then I know I'm in class. There's something I'm supposed to learn here. There's something I'm supposed to pick up on. And then as I start learning it, things start changing. I start cooperating with the learning process and that goes on. So it can happen in many ways, but let the system know you're ready for something like that you want to do something like that you are learning, okay, but it's going slowly and you'd like something a little more forceful or a little more dramatic, like Jessica, to get you going, to put you into a learning space. So sometimes we suffer from too much drama and sometimes from not enough. So let the system know that you'd like to engage in that way, and then be open to whatever that engagement is, because whatever it is you're thinking it might be, it won't be that. It's going to be something that's going to catch you entirely by surprise, so that you don't really know you're in school until the fourth or fifth time you've been there, and then you begin to realize it. This is a series of events for my education. Now you start taking it more seriously rather than it's just another experience.
A follow-up to the question is, can these happen with dreams as well?
Yes, it can happen in dreams as well. Absolutely. It can happen. It can happen here in this reality. We don't even have to get out of this reality for that to happen, where you can see that things just keep coming around. That experience that you had, well, you had it in this context, and now, hey, you get it again, and it's in that context, and oh, here it comes again, different context, but you start seeing that it's all the same lesson, and that means you're in school, and you need to pay attention.
Just to follow up again, if I could just clarify one thing, one brief experience, very short, is that a meaningful distinction?
Not really a meaningful distinction. Doesn't matter. It's experience. It's experience of some sort. Exactly, where that experience comes from is not all that important, because you learn from the choices you make in an experience. You have experience. Part of that experience is making choices, and even just attitudes or choices. How do you approach that experience? So the fact that you have an experience and that you are interactive with that experience, that's important. Exactly whether that was a dream, an out of body, an imagination, that's not really important.
Iluna, please go next.
Thank you, Donna. Tom, I identified the two fears that I have. The one is the fear of loneliness, and the other one is of I do not matter. Now, how do I work with them? Do I have to work through them in some form? Like Jessica alluded, that there's a process of kind of confronting it in a meditation. Or is it enough to just remind me when I feel angry that where it's coming from? So at which level is it most beneficial to deal with those?
Okay, you can deal with them at multiple levels, and you can deal with them at multiple levels all at the same time. But if you want to do it more quickly, then it's often a good idea to understand that fear and where it comes from and why you have it. Think of all the times that fear has influenced your choices, and that generally gives you a lot of energy, to stop that influencing your choices. So use that as kind of the energy to keep yourself going. Say, oh, I see that this has influenced my choices for years and years, and it hasn't really been the best choices. So if you get the sources and see that the source is just smoke, that it's not real, that sometimes takes some pressure off. But you can, and this is a little more slow, but it is probably more like the turtle and the hare. Often the turtle does win the race because the hare gets off on tangents and starts running in circles and doing other things and taking naps, whereas the tortoise just keeps on plugging. So the keep on plugging method is to just use your intent to be aware. You're aware of when you have that feeling of not being good enough or being inadequate or being lonely. You get that fear, and as soon as you get it, stop yourself. Don't make any choices based on that, and in your mind say, I don't want to be that way. I don't want to be kind of under the influence of that fear all the time. I don't want that fear making my choices. I don't want to be that way. And if you keep saying that in your mind, you will get rid of that fear, just because you're putting energy into letting it go rather than energy into the fear itself. So that's kind of the tortoise approach, in the sense that it's slow but sure and keeps you plugging in the right direction, and it will get rid of the fear eventually. It may take a while, but it will do that. Now, on the other hand, if you want to find the source, why? What is this thing about lonely, and what's the fear involved in there? Is it, fear of being by yourself, fear of missing out on things, fear of whatever, being, a lot of times people have a fear of actually being with themselves. People will turn on radios and televisions and just let them run in the background just because they don't want to be stuck with themselves. They don't want to have to look inside and see what's there. They don't want to have to deal with the fears and things. So in order not to deal with things, they have this constant source of distraction and constant source of things going on, and often constant source of friends and events to go to and things, places they have to be. And they're very, very busy because that keeps them from actually spending time with themselves. So you can look at the fear, try to get to know it, feel it, understand how it has affected you, and have an intention to just let it go. Let it go to where it's not pushing you, not making your choices anymore. And it will slowly just go away.
But with the tortoise approach that you mentioned, how do I move the intention and the awareness from after the event to before the event?
That will happen as first it'll be after the event. Oh no, yeah, okay, I did that, I see that. But eventually, if you just keep working with that, making that very clear statement, I don't want to be that way, then pretty soon you will begin to see it, not after the event, but as the event just starts to happen. And then you'll get to see it just before the event starts to happen. In other words, it'll move backwards in time slowly. At first, it's only afterwards, and you notice it. Oh, there I go again. But keep working on it. Keep having that intent not to be that way, and it'll go to where you'll notice it just as it happens. Well, it may still be too late. You may be stuck right in the middle of it. But then keep working at it, and it'll get before it happens, and then you can turn it off. And then eventually it'll get less and less happening, less and less, and then it'll be gone. So it's just a process. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Tom, the next question from Anonymous. Based on my research, I found two types of evolution: evolution of the body, evolution of consciousness. We are Homo sapiens. We carry the warrior genome. Does the consciousness, before it logs on to the avatar, choose to have these traits, such as the warrior genome?
Okay. There is nothing that will make you de-evolve. That's always a choice that you have. There's none of your genetics that are going to predispose you to being negative and doing, evil, doing bad things. Like anything else, things that, well, let me put it this way, it's like a gun, okay? A gun can be a very evil thing. Mm-hmm. It can also be something that protects. It can be a good thing. And the fact that you have a gun doesn't make you bad. It doesn't make you good. It's just you have choices of what you're going to do with it. How are you going to express that? So if you've got something in your genome that gives you lots of energy and pushes you out, and you need to go out and take charge and do things like that, well, you can do all that for love, for good. All of that can be expressed in a very positive way, or it can be expressed in a negative way. Mm-hmm. So yes, some genetic packages that we happen to get in our experience packets might be more challenging than others. Mm-hmm. We may be mentally retarded, or we may be a genius. Two opposite things. Both are very challenging. Both of those have their own difficulties in having to deal with that. But we can make either one of those a very positive incarnation. If the quality is there, we'll express whatever our genetics brings to us in a positive way. So I don't think that worrying about getting genetics that makes it harder for you to grow up. I think growing up is something you do regardless of what your genetics are. Mm. And sometimes that's maybe easier and sometimes harder. Depends on where you are and what level of challenge you're ready to meet, and what your environment, your environment's a goodly part of that too. What you do with that challenge. So I don't really think that's an issue. It's a potential that we have. Like I understand that some people, most females have two X's in chromosomes. Most males have an X and a Y, but there are some that'll have maybe an X, a Y, and a Y, or other kind of things that are not typical. And then we look at those people and say, well, those people more of those end up in prison than the ones that don't have that extra Y. Well, but that doesn't mean that makes them evil or makes them do bad things. It just means that they have maybe some extra push in them and they make poor choices with that push. So if you have a child that is gifted or that is slow or that is, driven to save the world or whatever it is they are, you have to work with that to help channel that into positive ways. And if you find it in yourself, you have to channel that in positive ways. So that just requires awareness. But we come in all sorts and types, which is good. And then we do what we have to do with that. And we make those choices based on the quality. So if we have a culture where being a quality human being is important, as opposed to making money, say, is important, being a quality human being is really important. And we have a culture that puts a lot of importance on that. Then there's a lot of those drives that might drive someone to be a drug dealer that would now be driving somebody to, do good things, because it has a culture that encourages doing the good things rather than the go for the money. So we all grow up together.
Thanks, Tom. The question goes on to ask, I ask because I study MBT and everyone refers to this point. It's not my fault. How can I explain to someone it's your choice?
Well, that's explaining that to somebody who doesn't want to admit it is difficult. But basically, one has to take responsibility for for your choices. The choices you make, whether it's to sell drugs or, to open a soup kitchen and help people who can't feed themselves, whatever you do, it's your choice and you have to take responsibility for it. And this idea that you can not take responsibility for and blame it on somebody else. Oh, yeah, I just got an extra Y chromosome. I can't help it. Or, oh, yeah, my parents beat me when I was little, so now I'm a bit of a sociopath. Well, all those things may be true, but it's still your responsibility and your choice. And some choices are harder than others, but it's your choice, your responsibility. Nobody makes you mad. Nobody makes you do high entropy things. You always have the ability to say no to the things that are high entropy and to say yes to the things that aren't. So it's what are you going to do with the choices you have? What are you going to do with the genetics that you have? What are you going to do with the parents that you have? You pull all that together and say, all right, that's my life. I was born poor. I was born desperate. I remember being, hungry and starving, and all right, that's my life. Now, what am I going to do with that? That's my experience. And then take responsibility for whatever it is you do with it. But to blame things, oh, yeah, he's only a bad boy because he grew up in a terrible place with terrible people and was, didn't have a good family and didn't have this and didn't have that. Well, all those things are true, but that person still has the responsibility to make their own choices. And we have lots of experience packets in lots of different situations where we get, sometimes it's really easy. We get a situation where it's simple to make good choices. And other times we have situations where it's really hard to make good choices. Who are you now? What are you? Who are you right now? Well, you're the sum of all the choices you've ever made. That's who you are.
Yolanda, please go ahead with your question.
Good afternoon. So the question I have is in line with the conversation. I think it's in line with the conversation we were having earlier with when Miguel asked his question. And you had said that there's no such thing as objective, only theoretical objective. And and I assume that's because theoretical objectiveness is because of our interpretation of data, the data stream. So what I'm curious is, for example, how is it we can come together to put somebody on the moon? Say, is that, what part of that has to do with a data, our rule set, and under our understanding of our rule set versus consciousness that allows us to put people on the moon or elsewhere?
Okay. Now, first of all, clear up the thing about objective and subjective. Everything is actually subjective, but we say that it's objective if the uncertainty naturally associated with it is very small. In other words, it's approximately objective. It's very small. So if I have a brick in front of me, I can say this brick is so long, so wide, so deep, and has this weight, this volume, and those things would all seem to be objective aspects of that brick. Has this color. But all of those things can only be measured to a certain degree, and after that it's plus or minus error. In other words, you don't really know exactly how long, how wide, how heavy, or what color. All of those things can only be described within a certain range of uncertainty. Okay, so that's why I say there really isn't anything that is totally objective. But if that uncertainty is small, so as far as that brick goes, all of those uncertainties are like in the 10th decimal place. Okay, they're all very, very small. So then we say that brick is objective. It's not exactly objective, but it is approximately objective. It's objective enough that we can all work with it and have the same idea of about how long, wide, heavy, and so on, and its color. Even though we know that if I say, well, it's kind of reddish brown, well, kind of reddish brown does not necessarily describe what somebody else who sees it sees, because they have a little different biology. They'll see things a little differently, but it's good enough. We all can kind of say things that are general enough that the uncertainty is not a factor. That's the objective world. It's that part of the subjective world with very small innate uncertainty about it. So you put somebody on the moon takes a lot of different things. It takes a will to do it. You have to want to do it. You have to be able to afford to do it, which means there's going to be a certain amount of sacrifice because you're not spending that money on something else. You're going to spend it on that. So you have to have, not only the inclination, but the ability to put resources, take away from something to put on that. And that's all in the consciousness choice level. But now when you have to actually make a rocket that has enough thrust to get you there and get you back and all the rest of that, well, that's what's done in this world of things that are approximately objective. Because of their approximate objectivity, we can count on them being or doing and being the way they are up to at least, a very small error. So we think, yes, okay, this heat shield is going to work good enough for them to come back, even though we can't specify exactly how it's going to work. But we feel that it's going to work well enough. You see, that's fine. So that's why it takes both. So part of our world is approximately objective, and that parts of our world that have lots of room for error, lots of rooms for change, where people just see different things and come up with different answers. We call all that subjective because it's all personal. What I think is just and what you think is just in a given situation, well, that's personal. So justice is a subjective thing. because the error bars on, well, I think this is just plus or minus, this much. Well, that plus or minus is so big that it overlaps with a lot of other people who have different ideas than we do. So that's kind of the difference between the objective, subjective, and what's required. Our science, unfortunately, has come to the philosophical conclusion that it only should deal with the objective world, with things that have very low uncertainty. But that leaves out a whole lot of things that are important to us, important in our life. Relationship is mostly subjective. Is relationship important in our life? Yes, of course. It's one of the most important things in our life. Love, caring, empathy, cooperation, all of these things tend to be subjective. And science stays away from it because it's not objective. And when people do try to study those things, they're forced to be as objective as possible. So a lot of times they will trivialize something in order to make it more objective, where the thing itself just isn't that objective. There's lots of uncertainty about it, lots of ways to see it. But they'll say, well, okay, there's lots of ways to see it, but we'll count 5 of them. We'll say, here's this way, this way, this way, and that way. And those are the ways to see it. And now we'll take measurements. How many people see it this way? How many people see it that way? And we'll go through all of this, but it misses the point of the significance of the thing to begin with. So a lot of our social sciences, in their effort to be quantitative and make it more objective, they sometimes lose sight of really what matters. And they know all sorts of quantitative things about something, but they don't really understand how it motivates people, or what the people think about it, or how it affects relationship, or other such things. So, and of course, the hard sciences don't see those social sciences as real science. The hard sciences are very prejudiced that way. They think only physics, chemistry, and sort of biology is a hard science. And everything else is a soft science, which isn't really a science at all. It's mostly conjecture and statistics. So, but that's a very, like I say, that's a very biased viewpoint from the hard science people. Social scientists, like sociologists and psychologists, they try to make their thing a science by making it as quantitative as possible. But a lot of that has to be qualitative. And qualitative is not objective. Quantitative things are objective. So even those soft sciences end up pushing themselves in toward a more quantitative viewpoint, and that makes them miss the point. So that's why science cannot look at, say, paranormal things, because anything paranormal is not objective, it's subjective. And if I'm a scientist, I can't do that subjective stuff because that's not science, and other scientists will laugh at me. Pseudoscience. So I can only do hard science. You see, that's unfortunate. We want science, we want logic, we want good, even statistical methods, to be applied to things that are subjective, because there's much understanding that we can learn in the subjective world, much things that are, many patterns, many things that are studyable in a very logical way. And because science refuses to go there, these things are not studied in a way that they probably should be. So that's a little bit about the two, subjective, objective, and how you need an interplay of both in a real, in the real world. Both are very important. And you need to take both of those realms important. It's not just that, well, the objective world's important and the subjective world is just flim-flam and hallucination. Nothing we can say about that. That's a very biased and unfortunate attitude.
No, indeed, because everything starts with a thought.
Everything starts with a thought.
with the potential of what
Mhm.
can. So that is very much in that subjective realm. So it's surprising science, they don't believe the very thing that allowed them to go to the moon first started with the thought itself, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
thank you.
Dondre, please go ahead with your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hear you fine.
Okay. Hey, everybody. My name is DeAndre. My question is on the 3 paths of spiritual growth, service, surrender, and the path of the warrior.
Mhm.
My question focuses on how to alternate between the paths efficiently to lower your entropy. So, for example, if you feel a fear and there's one side of you saying to let it go, everything's okay, everything is as it should be. And there's another side of you that says, fight this fear and show it who's boss so it doesn't come back. How do you pick between which one is the best?
Well, the way you pick is you always try the easiest one first. And if that doesn't work, then you use something else. So if you can just say, okay, just let it go. I just let that fear go. I'm not going to, I'm just not going to be fearful anymore. I surrender to that fear. All right. Now it's not going to bother me anymore. But if that works, hey, that was easy. But if it doesn't work, if you find yourself still caught up in that same fear trap, you're still making choices because that fear is pushing you to get those choices, then maybe you might try letting it go again, maybe in a different way, because letting go is a whole lot easier than having to fight. So then you'd let it go, maybe with a different way, a different approach, and see how that works. But if the only thing that works for you is to go find that fear, find out where did it come from, grab it by the roots and rip it up, because you are, I won't be that way, and you constantly are fighting it until it goes away. Well, if that's what works, then that's what you end up having to do. So it depends on you, the way you approach life, the way you see things. Some cultures are probably very dominant and they want to fight everything. Western culture is kind of that way. You got something you don't want, well, you wrestle it to the ground. That's kind of a typical attitude. You'll find other cultures that probably more in the East, or more in amongst people who are what do we call them, indigenous, or people with long histories. It's another way to say it. They may have other ways of dealing with it that you don't have to fight it to the ground. They have processes for letting go. So depends. Either way will work. Pick the one that's easiest, that works best.
Yeah, I thought that, but then once you said, I heard you say pull it by the roots before, I thought that meant this is to make sure that it never comes back. But if it was just either way works, you would always choose surrender, I guess. So.
Yeah. Surrender is a, it's easy on the outside. It seems easy. All right. You just give yourself up to a higher, to something higher, to something bigger than yourself. And that sounds pretty simple, but generally it's not that easy to do. Sounds simple. As far as its structure, it's very simple. But if you have spent time, say, if you spend a week living among monks, okay, now it's the religious people who often have the path of surrender. They just surrender to the higher cause, to God, and that's the idea. Okay, but if you go spend a week at a monastery someplace, and you'll find there's lots of praying going on, and there's lots of meditating going on, and there's lots of talking about love, peace, and tranquility. But yet when you interact singly and see the day-to-day things, you'll find ego, you'll find, arrogance, you'll find all kinds of things sprouting up. So surrender sounds simple, but it's not all that simple, because what you have to do is just by force of will change yourself. just let something go because you don't need it anymore. I surrender it. Don't need that anymore. Now, if you can do that, that's obviously the easier path. But many people surrender, but not really. They carry these other things going on the side and justify them. So just because somebody's been a monk for 20 years doesn't necessarily mean that they are very highly evolved. You'd be surprised how much struggling and backbiting and cliquishness and other such things can take place in monasteries. Who's better than who? You know, there's a lot of that ego stuff will come out even in those kinds of situations. So there's no route that's a piece of cake. They all are going to take, you know, some time and some effort to get there.
Thank you.
Our next question is also an anonymous question. During the last few months, I've made a concerted effort to let go of negative thoughts, to follow the path of surrender. Emotional reactions and fearful nightmares show up. Is this consistent with letting go of fear?
Yes, they are very consistent with that. Letting go of fear isn't something you decide to do one day and then do it. It's something that takes a lot of time to get rid of a fear. The fears that we have, the kind of fears we're talking about, are fears that are very deep-seated. They define who we are and how we see the world. They're part of our reality. And just to let one go because you don't want it anymore is much easier to say than it is to actually accomplish. So yes, that you will find these things that keep coming back and saying, oops, I thought I was past that, but evidently not. I still got these buttons and these emotional things. I need to pay more attention to that because you don't want to sweep them under the rug. You don't want to say, well, I'll just put those out of mind. And when they happen, I'll pretend they don't happen until they pass, and then I'll be over it. And then I can pretend that I don't have those things anymore. You know, the whole idea is not to pretend anything. It's to be a certain way, and you are who you are. So if you have those fears come up and those attitudes come up, then realize, okay, I still have that. That's a part of me. Now, where did that come from? And why did I suddenly get that bunch of feelings? Where did that come from? And then try to deal with it as best you can. Don't just push it aside as an oddity, kind of a data point that's outside of normal, therefore we can ignore it. It's there for a reason. It's you. And work with them. And eventually, and when I say eventually, that's not measured in months, may not even be measured in years, you know, it may be measured in decades. You will get past most of it. And as you get past some fears, you'll find others. Oh no, I thought I got rid of all those fears, you know, and then you'll find something else will pop up. And then you work on that. But yes, to have these little things that pop up and say, well, you still have some issues, perfectly normal. Anybody that didn't still have issues, I would first kind of imagine they probably were sweeping them under the rug, because having issues that come up is absolutely normal, and it's part of the process. It doesn't just happen instantly or quickly.
Thank you, Tom.
Sylvia, please go ahead.
Hi, Sylvia.
So I have a persistent question that I keep asking, and then I take it to the next level, and then I realize, oh, I really don't understand it. And anyway, so, and the question, it sort of reminds me of when I was a younger girl and I was raised in the Catholic tradition. And I always really appreciated all the lessons about, you know, be a good person and share and think of others. And there was a part of that that was really attractive to me. But the bit that really rankled with me was, you know, but you have to accept Jesus into your heart. And if you don't, because it always seemed very ego driven, so I didn't really appreciate that part of it. And I think I'm drawing an incorrect parallel. And I'm just being honest here. I know this is wrong, so I'm just exposing my lack of understanding here. That when I really appreciate the part about, you know, working in the scale of years and decades, and I really appreciate and enjoy that process, even when I come up short so often. But it really feels like a process where I'm learning. The much harder part for me has been the whole notion of having to have a relationship with an LCS in order to be a part of that process. And I sort of think, well, why? If I'm just loving, like, why do I have to meditate? Why do I have to have an out-of-body experience? Why do I have to do all that other stuff? So that then, of course, means that my attempts at developing a steady meditation practice are not as successful, because I think I'm not 100% bought in that I understand why I have to do that. If I'm, you know, if I'm already working on being loving and releasing fears, isn't that the point?
Yes, absolutely. That's the point. And no, you do not have to do any of that. You don't have to have, you know, you will just automatically have a good relationship with the LCS just because you're trying to grow up and you care, you're trying to be cooperative, you're trying to be a good person. That gives you a good relationship with the LCS. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to do anything. It's about being. It's about how you are. So the doing is often has to do with people who would like a more personal connection. You know, they want to connect with something outside of them, a personal connection. They want to talk to their guides. They want to, you know, have that outside connection. But really, the only connection that matters is the inside connection. That's the only thing that's there. So we talk about this, you know, you need a good personal relationship with the LCS, in that that's a metaphor for you need to be serious about growing up. You need to be serious about becoming love. Because if you are serious about growing up and becoming love, you do have a good relationship with the LCS. You put it in the terms of you need a good working relationship with the LCS, that works great for some people. Because that's the way they think. You know, they want to connect that to, you know, something bigger than they are. And other people, when they hear that, go, really? I'm dependent on, I have to do these other things. I have to get permission first, or I have to be liked, or, and then of course for them, that's not a good way to say it. A better way to say it is you just need to become love. You need to care about people. It needs to be about others, not about you. You have to not be so self-centered. And if you just do that, then that's all you ever need to do. Nobody ever need to do anything paranormal. Nobody ever needs to, have a precognitive dream or go out of body. Nobody ever even needs to meditate. Meditation is just one way to put yourself in a quiet space where you can just be. That's the point of meditation, is put yourself in a space where you can just be without all the thoughts about what you do and what you need to do and what you haven't done but should have. And all of the doing space usually comes with your thoughts. So meditation puts you just in a space of being with yourself. But you don't have to ever meditate in any kind of formal way. You don't have to get a mantra. You don't have to learn to, look at your breath or do anything else, take a course in meditation. All you have to do is be still, be with yourself, be who you are, be authentic. And that's all it takes. Meditation isn't required.
And can I just have a quick follow-up? And I think for me, what works, or what I call meditation for myself, are these little, it's almost like, and maybe it's because I have a short attention span. I don't want to do anything for too long, but they're these short but profound like connections just to reset myself. So particularly if something is happening that could pull me into a negative space, you know, it's like a reset. And I weave it within my day rather than taking time out separately. Like,
Yeah.
is that what you mean?
Yes, absolutely. That is, you know, typically when you're completely consumed with doing, you go learn to meditate to let go of that. Okay. When you're not completely consumed with doing, then you pop in and out of this meditation space naturally all sorts of times, whenever. And then when you get past that point, your life is a meditation. You don't have to sit down and say a mantra or do anything else. Your whole life is a meditation because you're constantly getting those little pieces and inputs. You don't even have to take a break and reach up and grab one of them. They just come to you as you need them. So you start out when you are wrapped up in doing, and you live in a world of, you know, of doing things. Meditation's kind of required to help you get out of that space. But eventually it's not. It's just a place you can go in a second, in a fraction of a second. Gather together yourself, your thoughts, who you are, you know, get centered, and now you're right back here. Well, that's meditation. That's a micro meditation, right? It's a meditation and it's small bites, just as you need it. That's fine. And eventually you won't even have to take that time out. Everything will just come as you need it when you need it. So yes, see, everybody's different. That's why, you know, teach me how to do this, or teach me, you know, everybody is so unique and so different that whenever you come up with a syllabus for how you're going to teach something, there's always going to be, 30% of the people that really don't work well with that syllabus. They need some other approach, some other way of getting there, which is good that we have so many different ways. There's so many different schools of thought, so many different practitioners, so many different modes of growing up, that we can find one that suits us. That's the good thing. If there's just one way, then only a certain number of people that resonate with that way would get there. So it's great that there are thousands of different pathways to grow up, and you just need to pick the one that works best for you.
Great. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah. I think, Sylvia, in our culture, we tend to be told to go to class, learn how to do it. Before you do anything, take a class, let somebody show you the right way to do it, and then you go do it that way. And we have this idea that there are right ways and wrong ways to do things, and that you have to get the right way. So many of us start these practices and we constantly are thinking, am I doing it the right way? Do it the way that works for you. Do it the way that connects with you. That's your right way. And we're too socialized in some respects, that we expect prescriptions and to have to do a certain sort of things to end up at a certain place. And it's more about being than doing. And that being is very personal. It's very subjective.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom.
Tom Campbell here. I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We now have well over 1,000 hours of free video on this user-friendly, ad-free YouTube channel. Though these videos are free to our viewers, they represent many thousands of hours in production and editing, and many thousands of dollars invested in video and audio equipment, along with the required computers and software to store and process the raw video into finished products. So far, all of this content has been funded directly out of our own pockets. Be assured, we will always continue to do what we can. It's our life, our purpose, a labor of love that we will continue to pursue as best we can. However, those pockets are not as deep as they used to be. Thus, we are now seeking to augment our resources with support from our viewers. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our newly created Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you.